Hello, everyone. Tommy Tables here. Gentlemen, I'm here with Lorn and Lou Wasserman's Ghost. We have a mission for you today. It's of utmost urgency, priority. We have to strike deep into the fatherland to shoot a whole bunch of people, I guess would be the best way to say this. And oh gosh, look at that. I brought up the Quand les aigles attaquent. That is the wrong poster. Okay, no, what I really wanted to do was to actually let me correct that. Well, I'll translate the French. The movie is Where Eagles Dare.
Yes.
Let's see if this one works. Well, that's a tiny one. Good golly, I've got to find a better poster. Well, at any rate, while I do that, Lorn, would you like to give us a bit of a recap on this fantastic film?
Well, it begins with the beginnings of an airdrop into enemy territory with a number of soldiers that are dressed in German uniforms, and there is a brief flashback while their mission is described. A few days before, a plane bearing a general with plans for strikes on a second front in the war crashed, and this general was captured by German soldiers. And so they're being sent in to rescue him. And almost immediately after they jump into enemy territory, things begin to go awry. And the commander of the mission also seems to be doing some things that could appear to be shady. You don't really know quite what's going on initially. And from there, hijinks go forward. There's a lot of twists and turns in the movie. It has an awful lot of action. It's 2 hours and 38 minutes, which you have Clint Eastwood and Richard Burton as the primary stars, although there are several other actors who you may or may not recognize as well. This was Lou's pick. I know that this is one of his favorites, I believe, and so he can probably give you more of the details than I can.
It turns out, as I discovered going into the background, this is Steven Spielberg's favorite World War II movie.
No kidding.
How do you like that?
And there are some things definitely pulled from this into Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Absolutely. And interestingly, although this is written by Alistair MacLean, who we've already covered in Ice Station Zebra, this was the first time that he wrote the screenplay first and the novel afterwards. And apparently there's some significant differences between the two. But supposedly Eastwood didn't like the script, thought it was too exposition dense. But when they offered him $800,000 and a chance to work with Burton, his agent said, you should take this, you know. And as I was just mentioning in our off-screen chat, this is officially the movie in which Clint Eastwood kills more people than any other movie he made. Over 100 fall to Dirty Harry's guns in this movie.
It is quite a thrill ride. And I know you guys just said that a lot of this was lifted and put into The Last Crusade, and I completely see that. But my overwhelming impression when I was watching this film, and again, I went into this cold. I hadn't seen this one before. So
good.
Yeah. It felt like a Bond movie set, like James Bond in a World War II movie.
Well, you know, it's kind of like the one in the Alps, on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah.
There's a cable car, there's a mountain peak, there's a castle. That's certainly true. You could make that comparison. One of the things, by the way, that Eastwood got for doing this movie was they guaranteed him a Norton P11 motorcycle, which he, quote, tested at a racetrack in England.
Oh.
And so they wouldn't let him do it during the movie because they were afraid he'd get hurt and, you know, insurance and all that sort of thing. The castle itself is still there. You can go there, but it doesn't have a cable car. The cable car was at a different place.
Oh.
And for those who haven't seen the movie, there's a big, long thing about this castle that's serving as the prison where they're holding the general, is up on a big mountain in Bavaria somewhere, theoretically, and there's a cable car to get to and from it that plays a rather large part in the film.
2 times.
And,
going up and going down.
Well, yeah, sure, because that's the only way to get up there, other than a helicopter, which the Germans didn't really have helicopters like this during the war, but what the heck. But the airplane at the beginning of the movie is a real 3-engine, why can't I think of the name of the damn German airplane. Anybody else remember?
No, I can't tell you what the German plane is, but it did remind me a little bit of the American Ford Trimotor.
Well, it was a kind of a similar to that, and it turns out that this airplane was actually being used by some minor Swiss airline, and they got it and repainted it with the German colors. And later, after the movie was made, it crashed, and it was literally the last one flying of that model plane. A Henkels, that was it, a Henkels. Anyway, there's all kinds of fun stuff like that. But the main thing is, yes, this is a war movie, but it is also, in a way, a mystery movie with all kinds of interesting plot twists, and things that you think are true are not necessarily true, and good guys that you think are bad guys and vice versa are not. So it's a wonderful mix of mystery and war movie.
Yeah, there was a lot of misdirection in this film, and it almost made me think that this film was the inspiration for, video games like Metal Gear Solid, which I'm not super familiar with, but enough to know that you're sneaking around, you've got to invade these places, set up explosives.
Well, Castle Wolfenstein, certainly.
Castle
going way back.
Wolfenstein, yeah. But I mean, on the subject of explosives, they certainly had a lot of those.
Well, Burton supposedly went to the producer, Elliot Kastner, and said, listen, I want to make a movie that my stepson can watch where I don't get killed at the end, because he takes that rather seriously. And that's where they came up with this whole thing. And then he was apparently on a major drunk during most of the movie. And a lot of what he did in the movie was dubbed later. And it turns out it's not really him, it's stand-ins. In fact, Eastwood supposedly nicknamed the film Where Stand-Ins Dare.
Oh, no kidding.
So...
Oh, dear.
And it was literally the last movie Burton made that was a success at the box office in the U.S. After this, it was all downhill. Anyway, he was having trouble with Liz Taylor at this point, apparently, so Burton was drinking away his troubles.
As we are wont to do.
No, I only drink the good things.
Yes, very true. So this movie... I've got to say, it was one thing that stood out for me right from the get-go was the music.
Ron Goodwin.
Wow. Did it ever set the atmosphere and the tone for this film throughout? And they had it was great. It was atmospheric, and they had parts of the movie which were not scored, right? And so when the music came back, it really helped manipulate the mood, so that you knew to be scared, you knew to be suspicious, you knew to be frightened, you knew to be excited. It was very, very well utilized in this film, I think.
Yes, I agree. And he did a lot of course, great World War II movie themes and others, Ron Goodwin, most notably 633 Squadron and the Battle of Britain, I believe. And supposedly... Burton did not like war movies and didn't want to do it, but needed the money. And
Away you go.
And interesting, Richard Burton and Alistair MacLean are both buried in the same cemetery in a little Swiss town called Séligny.
Oh.
So there you go. Curious 6 degrees of death. I don't know.
So this film came out in 1968, and it's considered to be a British-American action-adventure war thriller spy film. So I think that's our genre for today, right? Action-adventure war thriller spy.
Well, yeah, that's a very specialized genre. And by the way, the title, which was originally something else, comes from Shakespeare. In Richard III, he says, "The world is grown so bad that wrens make prey where eagles dare not perch."
Oh.
Hence where eagles dare. So there you go. Oh, you know who the stunt coordinator was for this movie?
Who's that?
The famous Yakima Canutt.
Oh. He was a second unit director, too.
Yeah. And one of the stuntmen, a guy named Alf Joint, actually lost 3 teeth doing the cable car fight scene. So there was some danger involved in making this thing. And Burton got paid $1.2 million. Junkers, that was the airplane, not Henkels. Junkers Ju-52. But anyway, it's a like I say, it's a really great whodunit, even if it wasn't a war movie. And it has certainly the flavor of Guns of Navarone and some of the other MacLean movies.
just going back to some of the trivia here, I think I'm reading the same entry that you are, Lou, because right after they talk about stuntman Alf Joint, who was the man whom 007 electrocuted in the bathtub in Goldfinger.
That's right.
Where he lost his 3 teeth during the cable car jump sequence. The next line is about him stating that at one point during production, Burton was so drunk that he knocked himself out while filming, and Joint had to quickly fill in for him.
Oh, God.
And then Darren Nesbitt observed that Burton was drinking as many as 4 bottles of vodka per day.
4 bottles of vodka a day. Well, that's where eagles stagger.
And then completely unrelated, it says visitors to the set included Burton's wife, Elizabeth Taylor.
Yes. Yes. And apparently Clint Eastwood wanted to make a movie with her, and he had an idea for one, and it never happened. And he also talked about 2 Mules for Sister Sarah, but that, of course, went to Shirley MacLaine, and he was making that when the premiere happened, so he was the only one who wasn't there at the premiere.
Wow.
But, these were different times than now. I mean, for one thing, they didn't reshoot it 12 times. Oh, here's a strange little piece of trivia. The famous radio call signs in this, broadsword calling Danny Boy,
Yep.
was used in the Victory of the Daleks Doctor Who episode during the Blitz. So a little tribute, apparently, and 6 degrees of Doctor Who or something.
Oh my.
Yeah, and by the way, Darren Nesbitt, who plays the evil stormtrooper, was Jewish, and he asked to meet a real guide in order to play the part, and the guy was a little shocked to see him in full black uniform. And Ingrid Pitt, who is the girl in the movie, was actually in a concentration camp in World War II, but escaped. So there was this. We have to remember, when I went to London for the first time when it was 1966, 67, the war was still alive in Europe. There were still bombed out buildings in London. There were still memories. And so we think of it as being so far away, but not for people over there.
Yeah.
And before Burton, Michael Caine turned the role down, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And anyway, we should talk more about the movie and less about the trivia, I guess. But Lorn, what did you like best?
Well, I'm going to go maybe in a different direction than you might think. A lot of what I liked was the sets and the location shots. And I also liked the one scene that I liked, of course, is the big twist scene, which I don't really want to give away quite yet.
Right.
Because that's a great character moment, and it left, the audience is kind of going, what is going on now? And that's great because everybody else in the scene feels exactly the same way.
It's almost like the denouement of a classic detective story. Where they get all the suspects in one room and reveal the mystery of what's going on, but they don't really reveal it entirely. It's got a lot of fun twists and turns that way.
Yeah. There's still a whole hour of movie left after that scene.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are still twists and turns even after that scene, like all the way through the entire film, which I was really impressed by. It was, it really kept you on your toes. It really kept you guessing. And no sooner have you kind of wrapped your head around the real reason behind the mission than something else is thrown at you. And you're kind of thinking like, all right, well, where are they going with this? And then that's interspersed with Clint Eastwood, two-handed machine gunning down dozens and dozens of Germans.
Supposedly Eastwood, when he first got the script, didn't like it and told them he needed fewer lines, and so they took a lot of what were originally his lines and gave them to Burton, because he said, I shouldn't be talking so much. That's not who I am in the movies. I'm the guy that shoots first and asks questions later.
I am curious to know just how many squibs they actually used in this picture, because I don't think I've ever seen that much ammunition expended.
Speaking of which, Darren Nesbitt, who played, again, the guy, was actually injured by a squib that instead of blowing out, blew up into his chin and took him out of action for a few days.
Oh, my.
So, yeah, but you're right. My God, talk about a good market for gunpowder. Jeez.
Well, it's interesting because we talk very much about sort of the machismo and the abilities and the strength of the leading men in this movie, but I felt that this movie was quite progressive in its portrayal of the three women in the film. Mary Ure as Mary Ellison, Ingrid Pitt, and then Olga Lowe as the sort of the more evil nurse. But the former, like the first two there, they were holding it together. They were doing their thing while like the guys were all getting captured and so on and so forth. And then she was just, sorry, go on.
That's realistic, though, because that is how an awful lot of spycraft happened back then. There were an awful lot of female agents on any side of a conflict. And so I thought that it was part of what was remarkable to me is the special kit that they made up for Maria that consisted of a gun, a clip, some yarn, and a lead weight. It's like you can get a lot done with those things. So.
Yeah.
Well, and all through the movie, they are planting things that are going to pay off later, like all the explosives along the escape route and
turning on the bus engine.
The bus and everything. Yeah. It just is. It is a meticulously crafted movie. Everything in it pays off.
Yeah.
There are no loose ends, and you wouldn't expect, there to be so many complications that can be unraveled in the course of a movie. Oh, here's a curious little factoid. Mad Magazine did a spoof of it called, are you ready? Where Vultures Fare. F-A-R-E.
Oh, boy. But, I do want to go back to the point that I had raised about the strong, powerful, independent women, because they really were. They really were. And yet, unlike a lot of the movies that we have in this day and age, you didn't feel like they were being forced. Like their characters felt completely natural. They felt they were great. Like they were I dare anyone to take issue with any of them, frankly.
Had they been performed by more famous women stars, you would have bought it. They would have been equal to Burton and Eastwood. Absolutely. I mean, these were working actresses that people knew in Europe, but they weren't as famous in America. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. But it was like, how did we lose that?
Good question. Good question. And when you think about some of the other movies of that same ilk, there really weren't characters like this. I'm thinking particularly of, why can't I think of her name? Barbara Bach in also McLean, Force 10 from Navarone. Nothing like this. Women were appendages to the plot. In this case, they are major parts of it. You're absolutely right.
100% integral. When Mary is in the castle and she just sort of opens up the window and sees Richard Burton and Clint Eastwood on that cable car making their way up, she doesn't gasp. Like she just takes it in stride, knocks out the support pillars so that she can get a rope to them. Like it was, I don't know. She put Ellen Ripley to shame in this film. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Well, Lorn, what were your thoughts? You were talking a little bit about your interest in how much was shot on location and how much was green screen, and I admit I had a bit of trouble navigating and sort of trying to figure out which ones were which. Like, I mean, in some cases it was quite obvious, they're in the bus and when they're driving around in the vehicles and whatnot, but they really interspersed those shots so much between the green screen, between the location. That took a lot of major editing, I think.
And this is in an era before all of the wonderful CGI tricks we have now.
Yeah.
Oh, you want an ultimate 6 degrees?
Okay.
Let us remember that John Smith, a.k.a. Richard Burton, is when he's claiming he's a German spy named Johann Schmidt, right? Which is John Smith in English. Well, do you know whose name is John Schmidt? Johann Schmidt? Red Skull.
Oh, yeah.
Red Skull is Johann Schmidt. Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a weird connection.
I knew that name sounded familiar. Gosh.
Well, I mean, John Smith, big deal. I mean, there's a lot of people, but it's kind of a funny connection as far as Nazi names go in fiction and in pop culture. Oh, there's a fun, I wonder if you can find this picture somewhere, but I'm looking at it. There's a poster of the movie where at the top it says, one weekend, Richard Burton and Clint Eastwood decided to win the war. And then it shows all the action.
I'll see if I can find that. But yeah, so here's the Red Skull. And no, he did not appear in the movie, unfortunately.
No, well, you know.
One might have expected him to. But the other thing that stood out to me about the movie, too, was just all of the various little details and things. Like, again, going back to, I feel like I was exposed to a lot of these tropes before seeing how they originate. And one of the things that I'm even talking about is the German commandant who is visiting, and he has that little, like the little one monocle, right? Like the lens in the one eye.
The Colonel Klink monocle,
Colonel
right?
Klink monocle, yeah. And I mean, it just, I don't know. It made it feel so authentic somehow. I don't know where I'm going with that, but
well,
yeah,
it played to every stereotype, but they weren't stereotypes. They seemed like real people.
They seemed like real
I'll
people.
say that.
Exactly.
And even in the sense of it makes you wait. The minute you see that cable car, you know there's going to be something happening on it someplace in this movie. But you wait and you wait and you wait and you wait and you wait. And finally, we have the big fight flying through the air with the greatest of ease on the cable car. For a long movie, relatively speaking, and here we are back to, last time we snuck in a short one. It never lags. It never pauses. When it pauses for the denouement of all the double agentry going on, it's still moving forward. It goes from suddenly being an action movie to an episode of Columbo and back again seamlessly.
Yeah.
I would push back on that a little bit from my part, I think, in that I think a number of the scenes go on too long. They stretch it out, I think, a bit long. I feel like you could probably trim about 25 minutes off this movie, and you actually probably wouldn't have cut out any of the plot.
That's true. That's true.
Well,
and I think that's in some ways a director and a producer and a studio saying we don't trust the audience to get what's going on if we go through it fast, so let's space it out with a lot of shooting and stuff because we know that sells.
But I mean, beyond that, though, I think, Lorn, what you're referring to are scenes where they move their goods from one backpack into the other, and then you see them pulling it up. Like there are a lot of drawn out. Sorry, or am I wrong on that?
No, actually, I was referring more to the cable car fight and the hallway fight where they bust all the squibs, because there's a certain point at which you know how this fight is going to resolve. It's fun. But it does keep going and going and going. And at a certain point, it's like,
especially that hallway. I absolutely agree. Because look, Clint Eastwood isn't going to get killed 2/3 of the way through the movie. That just ain't happening, gang. So it's almost as if you want to yell to the Germans, it's Clint Eastwood, don't bother, you're going to get killed. They're like the red shirts in Star Trek, right?
Now, in defense of the cable car scene, there is a moment where, you've got him jumping onto the top of the cable car, the German, or I guess I can give this away now.
Yeah, sure.
Some of the agents that they had parachuted in with are actually double agents working for the Germans. They had infiltrated MI6 for Great Britain, and they were going to bring them back, but they have successfully made their escape after having essentially knocked out Clint Eastwood, and they're getting away on the cable car. And he jumps onto the roof, and he sets a bomb on there, and I'm thinking to myself, well, now what are you going to do? So there's a big, long, drawn-out fight that takes place while they're all trying to get him off and get the bomb off and everything else. And I'm still trying to figure out, okay, you've sort of incapacitated the guys. Where are you going to go? Well, of course, as one cable car is going down, the other one's coming up.
Exactly.
And so he's got to jump to the other one. And so there are reasons to draw out that fight, and it did have a satisfying conclusion that I didn't see coming. So,
I wonder whether the degree to which you know what's coming, because I kind of felt like I did, is whether you've been on one of those cable car systems before. I remember as a kid going to the one in Palm Springs that goes up and down, which actually I think they used it in a Columbo way back when. And I thought, well, that's what's going to happen. They're going to get to the other one. But if you've never been on one of those and you don't think about the fact that they cross in the middle of the path up and down the mountain, that doesn't seem like an escape.
Yeah, it should have occurred to me, but I have to confess, I'm going to be a little quieter on this movie because my son had a sleepover last night, which meant I had a house full of teenagers, which
Oh.
meant I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, and so there were a couple of times while watching the movie that I started nodding off, and I had to keep shaking. Yeah, I had to keep shaking myself awake to try.
Your sleepover's there.
Yeah. So I kind of, there were a few details I'm a little bit fuzzy on, but
Well, that's why God invented DVDs. You can watch it again or streaming or whatever the case may be.
Well, speaking of that whole cable car thing, watching it on a TV, even on my couch, and knowing that, the majority of it was green screen and so on and so forth, it still, made my my toes curl up a little bit in fear,
And
just
it
because of the
wasn't,
fact.
by the way, it's not green screen. It's strictly front projection and rear projection.
Okay.
So these were simpler times. We couldn't make all that magic that way.
Wow.
Which is all the more impressive in how realistic it looks.
Yeah. And I mean, sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
Okay,
No,
I was just gonna say, like, just for me, having been on my fair share of chairlifts in my life, skiing and
Yeah,
whatnot.
right. You're up there in ski land.
Yeah. The fear of looking over one of those gondolas and just seeing nothing but a giant crevice there, and knowing that all that's protecting you from a fall is like a one little bar of metal. Those gondola scenes actually affected me quite a bit. And I mean, I just wonder how the audience would have felt in the theaters seeing that, 4 or 5 times larger than life.
I do think this is a movie that would benefit from, or at least the copy that I saw, a remaster with some good color correction.
Yeah.
Because I did feel like it was a little muddy with the grays
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
darks.
Dark.
But one thing that I thought was great about the picture, besides the sets and the locations and all of that stuff, was the costume design was
Yes.
really, really good.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons that I think a restored print would be good, because you'd really get to see that better.
Well-
I think it deserves that kind of treatment.
And you understand the cable car isn't there. The cable car is a different castle altogether than the one they used in
Yeah.
the movie. So the combination was really well done, too. You can actually visit that castle that they used in the movie, although I'm told the only thing that you'll recognize is that courtyard where the chopper was in the middle, but the rest of it doesn't look the same anymore or has been restored beyond what it was. But there was some great production management, some great set design, some great costume design. This was a professional effort all the way around. I absolutely admire the skills of the people involved behind the camera. Absolutely.
That chopper, though, I'm going to go back to that again because I thought it would be playing like more of a role. It felt like something out of MASH, right? And it like you said, Lou,
It's
felt
not a
little-
German chopper. It's an American chopper, by the way, and therefore not accurate to the period.
Right.
But of course, what you had to have was wouldn't the Germans have another way to get up there? Would they make everybody go by that cable car? Yeah, sure, you could fly in with a chopper. And B, if the chopper's there, why do we have to take the cable car back down? Well, we got to blow it up. So there's some plot problem solving going on in a lot of this, and it shows you how having to overcome these physical limitations adds to the creativity. I've always said, we all talk about theme parks a lot around here. The fact that at Disneyland, the Haunted Mansion had to have the stretching room to get you under the train tracks, under the berm to get you into the ride, and therefore it's an elevator. But when you go to Disney World, the floor doesn't go down, the ceiling goes up, which is cheaper because you're lifting a fake ceiling, but it's not the same thing. So overcoming adversity, also Pirates of the Caribbean, all the waterfalls at Disneyland are to get you, again, under the train track, out to where the real ride building is that you never see from the park. But at Disney World, there's none of that. So it just shows you overcoming physical adversity or physical obstacles making movies spurs creativity and makes the picture better, I think.
True enough. It was again, another fun film. It was a film that I really enjoyed, and I'm I'm still processing the fact that Burton was apparently blitzed out of his mind for most of it because
Oh
he
yeah.
really put in a great performance. You never
Well,
could have told.
you know, he's there's a point at which, look, compared to playing, I don't know, Richard II on the stage in London every night, this is easy.
Right.
There's a level at which a natural professionalism and experience kick in to take over when the spirit is not quite, or the spirits are willing, but the spirit is not. But you just do what you got to do. And for $1.2 million, which is what he was paid to do this thing, you find a way.
Yeah, and so that's the other thing. The budget for this film was, it says between 6.2 million to 7.7 million, which seems like quite a bit for the time, actually, back in 1968. And it
Well,
made
but
21
when he's
million.
getting $1 million too,
Yeah.
you've got, and Eastwood got 800,000 or so. There's 2 million of that right there.
Yeah. And it made 21 million. So yeah, that's a respectable return, I think. It wasn't, I don't know if it did it blow
And
the box office away.
It was very successful, and for the time, and the numbers compared to now, of course. How much do you suppose it would cost to make this movie today in 2024 dollars? 300, 350?
Must be something like that.
And
Yeah.
it wouldn't be as good because half of it would be CGI rather than the real thing. They wouldn't bother to go to Austria and find the castle, or Germany and find the castle. They'd just, draw it on a computer.
Yeah. I mean, we could probably see something similar to that with the Captain America, the First Soldier Marvel movie, right?
I was just going to bring that up because there are many scenes of the German castle and the various base locations that you can see Spielberg directly lifting, especially for
Oh,
Indiana
yeah.
Jones and the Last
Oh, yeah.
Crusade. Castle Dusseldorf is the big one, not Dusseldorf, but Brunwald Castle. Brunwald Castle from the Last Crusade.
Yeah.
But Joe Johnston was also huge on those, and he's the one that did Captain America: The First Avenger, and all those scenes at the beginning of Norway look like they were lifted directly out of Indiana Jones, which was
Absolutely.
directly lifted out of this. So yeah, if you wanted to do a modern equivalent, the guy you would go to is Joe Johnston.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was amazing when you saw Steve Rogers come on the screen in this film. I mean, that was something that I definitely, no, I'm kidding. Sorry. Bad joke.
Well, but the other thing is, of course, that back then, when you consider all of the big World War II movies that were being made in the 50s and the 60s and the early 70s, you made one phone call to what's it called, Berners, and it's the costume company in London, and we need to costume 800 German winter troops. Fine. When do you want it? Tuesday? They had all this stuff sitting on the rack ready to go. They had, in fact, when you look at movies like, Patton, for example, it's the Spanish Army in the real stuff, because that's all they had was leftovers from World War II. Even when you go to films like, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That's Franco's army that's out there playing Civil War guys, but they've got Gatling guns from the Military Museum in Madrid that are the real thing from the period. So it's nice to have access to all of that stock stuff. In other words, they didn't have to start from scratch and make the costumes the way they might have to do today, other than the principal players, of course.
Yeah.
It's something else that, again, and this is something I'm sure, Lauren, you picked up on as well. The influence, the scene in the hallway, the infamous hallway scene in this movie when they're shooting.
Oh, yeah, I know where you're going.
4 million bullets go off in that scene.
They throw the grenades, Eastwood throws them back, and then they bring out the machine gun.
Yeah.
And set it up, just like in New Hope with as they're trying to shoot.
It's an E-web blaster, yeah. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
And that's what all of the weapons from Star Wars, they were all World War II era firearms that were just modified with a few bits and bobs.
Put on. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, they all directly reference that, and my gosh, does that look like it just does look like the castle for the movie.
Here's a funny bit. Darren Nesbitt, who plays this blonde Aryan super German guy, the bad guy in the movie of all the bad guys, who was Jewish. And as I mentioned, he asked to meet a guy so he could get a sense of how to play him. And he showed up in his uniform with the SS uniform, and the guy fainted in shock. And they found out the guy he was talking to was Himmler's driver.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they said, Nesbitt said that the Jewish Chronicle called me afterwards and said, how could you play a German? And I said, I do it because I play them very badly, and that seemed to satisfy them.
Wow. Yeah, no, Nesbitt, he was very good. He just oozed slime, right?
And also, he's a very serious threat because he starts calling Mary Uri on her cover because she's talking about having been from Dusseldorf, and he says, well, wait, wasn't the train station on the other side of the square from what you just said? And he's a real threat. By the way, if you recognize him, if you're a fan, as I am, of The Prisoner, he dyed his hair blonde for this movie to be the Aryan whatever. He also plays one of the many number twos in The Prisoner, and he shot that episode around the same time as this, so he has that same blonde look in that show.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think what was interesting about his performance there, where he's going on a date, presumably with Maria, but that's what makes him an effective officer, is that he's essentially interrogating her.
Yes.
Subtly,
Yes.
It's a little bit like Christoph Waltz's.
Yes, very good comparison.
Yeah, at the beginning of Inglourious Bastards, it's the same.
That
kind
no
of
matter
thing.
what other motivation he may have, whether it's getting in her pants or whatever, he's always on the lookout. He's always suspicious. He's always inquisitive, and
Always
those kind of
searching for
guys can give you troubles if you're a spy.
Yeah. But
That's another thing. As good as they are, and as well equipped as they are, and as well planned as it is, you feel a real sense of their danger, and you're worried for them through the whole movie.
well, the tagline of one of the posters, and I'll bring this up again, is basically it's a good day for just your average suicide mission.
It's one of the things that I do like about this, though. I love the Indiana Jones movies, but one of the things that I think Indiana Jones has had a little bit of a detriment to is it did the same thing that Star Wars did with Stormtroopers, and that it made the Nazis all seem like kooks and ineffectual, with few exceptions.
Yes.
Whereas here, they are competent. They believe in their cause. They're prosecuting the war from their perspective.
Yeah.
They're not dummies, and that makes them a credible threat. And I think that part of the reason that we have some of the trouble that we do in today's society is that you have people throwing these terms around like they know what a Nazi is. And this shows a little better what Nazis really were.
Yeah.
And you know what it reminds me of when you say that, Lorn? In the film that we did, Ice Station Zebra.
Yeah.
When Ernest Borgnine has that line and says, yes, he would die for his cause as much as you would for yours. That these people, look, I have a big aversion in lots of movies to making the bad guys silly.
Yeah.
Because suddenly you diffuse their menace and you make them less of an obstacle to overcome. What was the movie Z? The famous movie about the Greek fascist uprising by Costa Gavras, where they call the bad guys who you've been scared to death that are going to get the good guys all the way through the movie in the end, and they're making them look silly, where it's a bad move to make your bad guys weak or silly, because suddenly it makes your good guys weak, because what's the big deal overcoming these morons?
Well,
You've got to have a credible threat.
This was actually one of the reasons that I liked the Andor series, is because I felt like that was a necessary course correction that showed the Empire is deadly. They are competent.
Exactly.
And they tried to make stormtroopers a threat again. And the more they do that, the better I think it works.
That you're referencing some sort of Star Wars fan fiction, right, Lorn?
No.
No.
Andor and Rogue One. I
Yeah, no, I hear you. Absolutely. You can't have when I was a kid, there was a record of Paul Frees and other people doing songs that were invented to tell the story of Rocky and Bullwinkle. And Paul Frees did a song as Boris Badenov called "You Got to Having a Crook, a Schnook." And you got to have a bad guy. And the line, and it's really true, in the middle of the song was, if there's no one who is bad, how can you tell who is good? You got to have a villain and a cad because it's clearly understood. And that's this movie. Everybody's seriously dangerous to these guys, from the minor officers to all of those guys in that big conference room scene.
100%. It's a basic principle in comic books and comic book movies and in folklore and whatnot. I mean, Batman. Part of the reason why Batman is so beloved and is arguably the most popular character on the planet is because he has such an amazing rogues gallery of villains. And that's, oftentimes that's been a bit of a criticism levied at Superman.
And you can write them off as crazy, the Joker or whatever, a Riddler or whoever, but you can't write them off as not dangerous because they really are.
I think the reason that Batman has the staying power, though, is because that he's a man of principle. The question always gets asked, why don't you just kill the Joker? Because obviously he's responsible for all of these other deaths, and he knows that. But he refuses to break his principle because that would make him one of the bad guys.
Exactly.
By acting as that example of the principle, what you want other people to aspire to, the hope is that you are raising up society so that they understand this is where the good is, this is where the bad is, and here's the line.
Yeah.
And that you can't descend to the level of your enemies.
Without becoming the enemy yourself.
Without invalidating all of your principles. Exactly.
And I think that's why so much of our storytelling now is muddied, is that we want to introduce moral ambiguity, which actually can be fun. I think there is a place for anti-heroes. Clint played a lot of those. Yeah. But not everything can be morally ambiguous, and not every villain has some type of a triggering event that caused them to go astray and they're just misunderstood.
And the great line is, some men just want to watch the world burn.
So, Lorn, you're saying you're tired of having your expectations subverted then, or?
I think that, what I'm actually trying to say is that I think you can sometimes have a movie where you have a villainous perspective that is interesting. I didn't necessarily think Maleficent was a bad idea, for instance, but then they tried to do that with all of them. And you cannot do that. That doesn't work. I do think that it helps to have a three-dimensional villain where you have somebody who may be on the bad guy's side. The saying is always that the villain sees themselves as the hero. If they actually have a natural motivation for doing what they're doing, that works best. And that kind of goes back to our last conversation when we were talking about Apollo Creed, where I wouldn't call him a villain per se. He's the antagonist. He's playing a heel.
Yes.
But he, in his story and in the story as a whole, he's just a guy defending his title. And he's wanting to put on this exhibition match and get a little attention for himself. That doesn't make him a bad guy. And in fact, he's the guy in the room, along with the rest of his team. He's the only one intelligent enough to recognize that this guy that they're plucking off the street is actually a credible threat because he's taking it seriously.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I mean about not ridiculing your villains in a movie, because suddenly if your good guys are taking them seriously, but the audience isn't, the good guys are weakened in the process.
Yeah, they look ridiculous.
They're made to look ridiculous. Exactly.
And
exactly.
I feel that you guys hit on a really good point here. It's completely fine to give your villains motivation and to explain their backstory and to give them personality and to let the audience understand where they're coming from, but you don't have to make them misunderstood bad guys, or good guys, right? Like that's what I think is lost in so many of, especially, Disney productions these days.
Well, there's a fear, I think, of casting judgment on any action. The feeling seems to be that we don't want to judge anything anymore, and I think that's wrong. If nothing is worthy of judgment, then everything is allowed, and you cannot possibly have good guys or bad guys.
Well, and this is why the shows that work. I'm thinking it's funny because what you just said, the watchword for Harry Bosch in the Bosch books and the series, he says, everybody matters or nobody does. And that's powerful stuff. And this thing, here's a movie that's all about World War II and all about Nazis, and there isn't a shred of the concentration camps or the tortures or all the rest of that stuff in this movie, and yet these guys just have a simple motive. They plan on conquering the world. Sorry, what's your problem?
Yeah.
And that's the fact that in their minds they are absolutely right to do that because hey, we're the master race and it's part of our legacy to do this.
Divine purpose.
But I'm just saying.
Sorry,
You
manifest
can't
destiny.
you can't talk them out of it. You can't reason them out of it. You can't convince them that they've done the wrong thing. All you can do is kill the bastards before they kill you.
Yeah.
And there are parallels, certainly in our modern world, in the Middle East and elsewhere, that we could learn from these movies. I wish these movies were more prevalent, and people could, they weren't telling the audience in 1960. What is this? 8? I forget.
1968. Yeah.
The audience then, a lot of them had been in that war.
Yeah.
And they knew that it was a war for the survival of decent, honest humanity and civilization, really.
Yep.
And so there was no question about killing 100 guys in a hallway because, well, you have to. You just have to.
That is one thing that I think the movie does really well too. Is there's a few scenes where Clint just assassinates people very quickly. I mean, very quickly, without any real pause to think about it. There's just, all right, we've dispatched him. We need to carry him off into the side, and it's war. You're in war. You're behind enemy lines. This man is the enemy, and that's the way that it works.
The mission is the point, and the rest of it is, well, collateral damage or whatever you want to call it. But you're absolutely right, Lorn. It's do or die, quite literally. Yep.
So, guys, let's talk a little bit about our favorite and maybe less favorite parts of the movie. And Lou, can I start with you?
I like that they didn't stint on process. All of that stuff where they're planting the explosives and unpacking the packs and all that other people would have said, oh, cut to the chase. We don't need to see all this. No, that gave the film, what's the word I'm looking for? Resonance. It gave it, but it showed you this is a difficult job and it needs planning and it needs preparation. And the fact that they set up their escape route and they set up the thing with the bus and all the things that they plan, that when they're doing it, you're not quite sure why they're doing it or why the film is even taking time to show you them doing it. But every single thing they plant in this movie pays off before the end. How many movies can you say that about? Not many.
Well,
not many.
There's a scene where Burton has to basically rappel up a rope up the side of the German castle.
Yes.
And I was watching that, and earlier today I was actually reading an article about how Canadian Armed Forces are, like, the recruitment has just gone off a cliff and whatnot. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, geez.
Well, part of the research I did on this movie says Burton was too drunk to do it, and so they attached him somehow to a crane and hit it, and that's why Eastwood got pissed off because he actually climbed that wall and he was beat up by doing it, and he looked at Burton and Burton was 3 sheets to the wind and didn't care. So it's good to be the king.
Well, Burton does say when he gets up there, he's like, "Oh, that damn near killed me," right? Then they make a gag about it. Like Mary says, "Won't you give Clint Eastwood a hand?" He's like, "No, I did it myself. He can do it himself too."
Exactly. And Eastwood gives him this look when he gets up to the top that, like, well, thanks a whole hell of a lot, there, soldier.
Give me a hand. All right, and what about something that you weren't so keen on?
Well, of course, for the time, I would say, as much as I liked his performance, that the Nazis, the guys were a little stereotypical.
Yeah.
But and the Quislings were a little stereotypical. I thought it was interesting the way, and I don't want to spoil the movie for people, but the way they gave them a choice of what to do about the fact that they'd now been exposed. That was good, but you needed that coda to the movie to finish the plot, but it did sort of give you a less than action ending in a way, and that was a little weak.
Yeah, fair enough. Lorn, how about you?
Well, I already kind of told you my favorite scene. It's the one where essentially all of the plots and double plots are revealed. I really enjoyed that scene. I'm going to turn Lou's praise of the planning on its head a little bit, because I think that was the downside to me for this movie.
Yeah.
There are so many bullets expended. There are so many things that happen just at exactly the right time. No plan ever survives contact with the enemy as well as this plan.
Fair enough.
And that took me out of it a little bit. It's like, boy, these guys are getting awful lucky an awful lot. So, but if you can look past that's my only real criticism of the movie, is that it's that it happens as it had to happen for the movie to happen the way that it does. So,
I think in my case, one of the things that I liked the most about the film were, again, just the twists and the turns, and not even the major ones, which, you know, obviously I enjoyed, but even the smaller ones, like when they're in that beer house and the Germans kind of come in. Yeah. And they're like, you know, we're looking for 4 or 5 deserters, and you know that they're looking for them. And your expectation is that they're just going to get up and there's going to be this big action scene, and, you know, they're going to fight their way out. And instead they're like, no, it's us. We surrender. And you're like, oh, okay, sure. And where they go with that sort of thing, the I guess the subversion of expectations before it became a thing by Rian Johnson. I really like that, and there was quite a lot of that in here. You really did not know where things were going to go in this film, which was really very, very much appreciated.
There is that scene in the beer hall too, where Burton sits down with the other German officers, and he's apparently flirting with this agent that he already has installed in there. And the one officer says that you're bringing disgrace upon the Wehrmacht, and he says something to the effect of what's your name, and he says that he's I think he said he was Bernie Himmler.
Yeah.
And he says that's hair major to you, by the way, and completely cows him. And I think you get away with that because you're Richard Burton. But that was a great scene. That was a good scene.
Yes, it almost makes you wonder, and I have no idea if that was something they improv'd. Well, how about if I told him I'm Himmler's brother? That would stop him. That was a lot of fun.
And then as for the things I didn't really particularly like too much, there was very, very little. Like this movie really kind of absorbed me. There were some things that did take me out of it, like when they, at the end, when they had to jump out of the cable car to that freezing river, basically unscathed.
Yeah.
As someone who's tried to do polar bear dipping, I can tell you, it wouldn't have.
I've never done it out there in the world, but there was a gym I used to go to. They had one of those ice plunges.
Yeah.
Once was enough. Thank you very much. When you come up and I'm coming up so I can breathe, but your lungs don't work because you're so frozen.
You're seized up. Yeah.
Oh God.
So I mean, there were again, like Lauren said, there were some parts of the film where it had to happen for the sake of the film to happen, and you just kind of have to run with it. But that's very, very faint criticism. Overall, this was another fantastic film to watch. Just great. Thank you for the suggestion, Lou. I loved it.
Well, I mean, it's. Like I say, it's not. We have on our schedule one at least a war movie that is based on a true event, and that's a different kind of genre all by itself.
Oh, are we doing Captain America: First Soldier?
No.
No. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Maybe someday, but my point is, this is a totally fictitious thing.
Yeah.
The only relevance to reality is that the general supposedly basically has the D-Day secret in him, but it works in a way that very few work. I mean, most I think in a way, the reason why so many World War II movies are based around real, Midway, Battle of the Bulge, whatever it is because people knew those historical landmarks. This is about nothing that was real. And in a way, it wins because of that. And the fact that it has all of these whodunits in it and all of these twists, and like I say, parts of it play like an episode of Columbo or Poirot or any detective thing where they get all the people in the room and figure out who done it, and then it turns out that's not even who done it. Gives it an extra thing beyond the war movie aspect, beyond the bullets and the bombs, that really make it special. Really make it special.
And this was, I think, a very special genre, guys. Thank you very much to the both of you. Now, as Lou intimated, we do have a schedule, and we've got something interesting coming up. A bit of a veer. I don't know. Do you have a hint that you'd like to give the audience?
Well, since the next movie is Lou's. Who am I? Is Lorn's choice. Lorn, give us a hint.
It has Tom Hanks doing one of the most interesting accents that you've probably ever heard.
And it has, as you pointed out, which hadn't occurred to me until you did, some allegorical aspects to it that probably were not even realized by most people who watched it. But I think you're absolutely right about that.
That's actually why I wanted to do this movie, is because I feel like for those people who don't know what movie we're talking about, can I say what it is?
I don't care.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We're going to be reviewing The Lady Killers, which is actually a remake of an old British comedy, although done with a very American spin. And this movie, I believe, I don't think it actually did very well. I think it kind of flopped. And I've had a theory ever since that movie came out about what the movie is actually about, which is not what it appears to be about. And I think the subtext may have gone missed. And so that's
and your theory is fascinating and right on, and I'm ashamed that it never occurred to me when I saw it originally.
Yeah.
That's how powerful it is, guys. So you've got something really special to look forward to with our next exciting exploit.
I'm really keen to watch this again with that in mind. Yeah. But we're not telling until the next time.
But if you want to get ready for next time, you might want to watch the Old English original with Alec Guinness in the role that Tom Hanks plays and see the differences. Thank God we all have access to streaming and all of the wonderful things. And by the way, I'm going to say it again, go buy these things on a disc, because who knows what trigger warnings and edits and other BS they're going to put on them as our woke society starts getting embarrassed by the idea of Clint Eastwood shooting 100 guys in one movie.
And not even that, but this week we saw Sony, which purchased Funimation, which was an anime streamer. They closed up shop, and everyone who bought anything and had a library there that going back for years, just it went up in smoke. Poof,
it vaporized, exactly. Well, they're after everything. I saw a story this week, and this is totally off subject to our movie. PETA has decided that merry-go-rounds objectify animals and therefore should be banned. And if I told anybody sensible that a year or 2, 5 years ago, you'd say, oh, come on, that's a joke. It's not a joke anymore.
One step closer to idiocracy. Every day we march more closer and closer.
So if you like these movies we talk about, or they sound interesting to you, even if you, $3.99 or something to rent it on Amazon to watch it, buy the damn disc, folks. Build yourself a library, because I'll tell you something about every movie we've done so far and every one we plan on doing in the future. You can pull them out 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now and watch them again and again and again, and share them with your kids if you have some. And if you have some that are too young, share them with your grandkids someday, as I am doing and as I have done. This is our cultural history. This is our legacy as a society. And you should invest a few bucks in it if you want it to continue.
Lou, I'm glad.
End of soapbox.
You've just confirmed that we're going to be reviewing Battlefield Earth as well, so thank you.
Oh, God.
On that note, gentlemen, thank you very much. This was a fantastic conversation over a fantastic movie. Everyone who has listened to this, if you made it this far, thank you very much. Let us know what your thoughts are. Have you seen the film? Are you going to see the film? What did you think of it? Are you a fan of Clint Eastwood? Are you a fan of Richard Burton? Can you drink 4 bottles of vodka a day? Leave us your comments down below. We actually really want to know. I mean, especially that last one. Wow. And all that to be said, if you have any suggestions for future films, don't hesitate to let us know as well. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a wonderful day or night or morning, as the case may be, and see you next time.
Good night, everybody.
We hope you enjoyed that special presentation of The Genre Guys here on 23PO. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more content like it. And if you want to enjoy every episode of The Genre Guys as soon as they are released, be sure to become a member at WWII's YouTube channel. What were your thoughts on this amazing film? Let us know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. T3PO. Please comment, like, and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to That Park Place Podcasts Online, your source for exclusive content and highlights from WWII Pro, The Pro Show, and That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.